Okay, well, we'll get started with the conversation. I am Sid Ziegler from Outsports. We're here with 5 people from professional sports teams to talk about how LGBTQ people can better engage their favorite pro team in embracing the community. With us today are Amy Werdine from the Minnesota Vikings, Joe Altenau from the New Jersey Devils and Prudential Center, Carl Crudup from the Sacramento Kings, Lisa Figgenbaum from the Sacramento Kings, and Erik Braverman from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think I got that right.
You did.
So listen, as I said to these folks earlier, I'm not big into introductions. I'd rather just jump into the conversation. If you have a question, feel free to hit the Q&A button below or the chat button below. We'll see it either way, and we'll get to the questions as they come. The first thing that I would actually like each of you to kind of talk through is just generally, what are some of the steps that you've had to take to get buy-in internally for a stronger embrace of the LGBT community? Whether it's expanded Pride Night events, whether it's working with local LGBT groups, what are some of the processes that you've had to go through to get that done? And Joe, let's just start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sid, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the next hour. For us, this was our 4th Pride Night, and we had total buy-in from the beginning. I was just pleasantly surprised with how much buy-in we had. Everybody from every organization within the New Jersey Devils really came out and found ways to support the evening, whether it was our community relations team or our marketing team. Everybody really jumped in, and so I think that that's how we approach all of our events and activations. Is we're not going to just dip our toes and we're going to go in full-fledged, and so that's exactly what we did. And it's been a great 4 years of having Pride Night, and that's been absolutely the highlight of my time there.
Amy, give us an overview of some of the steps that you had to take to kind of secure some of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Sid, thanks for putting this together. I'm excited to be here. Before I answer your question, though, I do have to give a tiny little shout out. Today is my brother's girlfriend's 30th birthday, and they moved their dinner reservation a little bit so that they could join. And it was the first night that my girlfriend and her mom were going to be able to go grab dinner here in Minnesota, just the 2 of them, in many, many months, and they moved that dinner. So I have to give a shout out and a hi to my family that I love. And, we had to take the first step. The NFL has been historically behind most of the other leagues in terms of Pride Nights and celebrating Pride in the LGBTQ community. We only have 10 home games, so doing something like a Pride Night at a game can be challenging. So just taking that first step and talking with leadership, seeing what we can do, coming together with a full formed plan that we can actually execute was really important to me. So we've been at Twin Cities Pride. This would have been our 3rd year there. And instead of our first year trying to do this massive blowout that was going to cost $30,000 and who knew if people would want to participate, we kind of kept it small. And then I've tried to grow it every year from there, showing that it's successful, it's worth it, it's the right thing to do. So being able to start small and having buy-in from leadership is absolutely crucial.
Who was some of the leadership that you had to get buy-in from?
Our COO, Kevin Warren, who's now the Big Ten commissioner, absolute great advocate. I called our director of HR. We didn't have a diversity and inclusion council. We didn't have a diversity and inclusion department at all. This is just kind of my brainchild. And so I called HR and said, hey, can we be at Pride? And she's like, I don't know. Let's talk to Kevin. I've been hired on full time for 2 months here. You want me to pitch this to the COO? And I did and got the support. So, when the COO signs off on something, it's pretty easy to get the rest of leadership's buy-in.
Erik, the Dodgers have a long history, one of the longest histories in all of pro sports in embracing diversity, and you get into all the history. I'm curious, one of the things that I think makes the Dodgers stand out is not just what you do for Pride, but your year-long embrace. What are some of the steps that you had to take in starting with a Pride that was at first organized externally, and then bringing it internally, and then expanding it to a year-long initiative?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, I join everyone in thanking you, Sid, for putting this together. I think this is as important for us as panelists as it is for people who are watching and participating as we continue to grow. I think, you hit on it with the Dodgers in having, a long and proud history of inclusion and diversity. But, I think that when new ownership came in 2012, I've been with the team since January of 2009. It was a really easy concept to sell across the board. I think to Amy's point, and probably everyone here across the board, it was literally, a brainchild that we had, but we had to put together a full marketing communications strategy to go along with it. And that was to get internal champions, not just the openly gay executive in the marketing department. It's to get community relations to buy in. It's to get group ticketing, to get sponsorship, to understand that there's a valuable community, and to sell it through all of the different departments, and literally to have allies within the organization who would help to see the value in developing this partnership year round. And when you say that, my initial year that we did this had nothing to do with our Pride Night. That Pride Night happened to be sort of the culmination of a lot of community things that we were doing authentically and behind the scenes. We weren't even looking for attention, but we were investing. We were sponsoring teams in LGBT leagues across the city. And then it all sort of culminated with bringing it together with a Pride Night. And as most people know, it's grown each and every year. And we push the boundaries each and every year. And Pride Night every year, much like any of our other diversity or inclusion nights, is a culmination of a year-round effort. Because I think if you do it if you just try to do it as a one-night promotion or a ticketing event, it comes off as pandering. And I think the community is smart enough now to see right through that.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when I went to the Sacramento Kings Equality Night a couple of months ago, that was one of the things that I heard over and over was this was not just a night. This was a full community involvement.
For sure.
And I'm curious, having both Carl and Lisa here to talk from different perspectives within the same organization. You probably entered the organization at different points, different evolutions of Equality Night. Can you give me an idea of what that evolution has looked like and how you've gone about building something that, when that seemed like every corner of the community, LGBTQ community in Sacramento was a part of what you were doing. So kind of, what the evolution has looked like, what you inherited, and how you went about really engaging the local community. So Carl, I'll start with you.
I'm gonna allow Lisa to start here. She's, I've been with the organization for 2 years, so she can give you a better idea of the evolution, and I can kind of take it from, my 2 years that I've been with the team from there.
I love it. I'm the OG here. So, look, one, I'm so glad, Sid, you were able to come join us for our night. The panel that you were a part of and all of the other aspects were just so impactful. So thank you for taking the time out to do that. So, going back, I've been with the Kings a little over 7 years. It's interesting. I think in general, organizations have good intentions. They want to help. They want to support these things. Sometimes they just don't know how, right? And I think, one of the pieces Amy hit on was, if you can come up with a plan and you can spoon feed it to them and make it as simple as like, hey, I'll take care of all of this. I just need a yes. A lot of times that'll get you what you're looking to accomplish. I think some of the other ways I was able to overcome any hurdles here was just, it's always helpful to point to what other organizations are doing too, right? Because then you get that Jones effect, like, oh my God, are we the only people not doing this at this point? Plus, it gives you a bar to aim for, like, okay, you know, this is what the teams in the NFL are doing. Let's see if, as the NBA, we can kind of elevate that. And everybody in these organizations loves some competition, but just generally, you know, it's not just about one night a year, right? It is this 365 environment and support system, not just for the community externally, but internally, making sure that members of the LGBTQ plus community feel comfortable working for the Kings, that we're recruiting members of the community and growing them. So, you know, Carl is a great example of that and a great point of pride for me. But, you know, we do things like bring in trainers from our local community center to talk about terminology, to just give a full education to our entire full-time staff. You know, we march in the parades, we go visit the community centers and ask them how we can help the community. So we've got social media doing a bunch this month for Pride. And for me, it was amazing. Like, I didn't ask anyone to do that, right? I think people assume if you're the gay person in the group, you're the one making all this happen. In fact, not at all, right? And so that's a really cool moment too, just knowing that once you get these things started and you build it into your culture, it'll start to amaze you and surprise you, just, you know, what other departments pick up and do, not just to support you, but obviously the cause as a whole. So, but yeah,
I think Lisa, to that point, Lisa, oftentimes the allies, the people who are inside the organization, sometimes become stronger advocates, because we want to be careful that we don't just get looked at as the LGBT employee pushing our own agenda or initiatives. And oftentimes it's people who we work alongside who become as strong or stronger.
That's such a good point. Yeah, it's such a good point. Or sometimes I just laugh like, why didn't I think of that? But yeah, the allies are super important in the conversation.
Yeah, I'll just take it back, just walking into the organization and looking around. Lisa hit the nail on the head, is that the Sacramento Kings, since I've been there for the past 2 years, it's been inclusion 365. So having things like Equality Night or having executives showing up to March in the Pride Day parade all seems so very natural and normal. So when we have events like Equality Night and it's a NBA game, it only feels right, and we have so much buy-in from the community as well as the organization as a whole. So it just feels good.
Well, again, just kind of a little bit more from Lisa and Carl. How did you, you know, when I talk to people about things like this, they point to, oh, it's so easy to do in San Francisco or New York or LA. You know, Sacramento, I joke that Northern California past San Francisco is essentially Alabama, and the politics bear themselves out that way. So how do you find people in the LGBTQ community to work with you and help guide you when maybe the resources aren't always obvious?
Yeah, you know, and I have a unique perspective here. I started in group sales, and now that's one of the departments that I oversee, which obviously plays a large role in, you know, theme nights or any of these topics. So it can be challenging, right? And I think one of the other things that can be challenging is not everybody plays nice in the sandbox too, you know, and that's not specific to our night. That's a bunch of these theme nights, and it's a little disappointing, right? Like, you think everyone could come together for a common cause, but navigating through the politics of some of it can be hard. Trying to work with people towards the Bay Area didn't sit well with some of our local groups and things. So you learn as you go through it, but it's so very important that you do find internal and external champions of this. Because there's a lot of times where, again, organizations have a good intention, but they just miss, right? And it may not, maybe it's just that the night felt like a little bit of a flop. You couldn't even really tell it was a theme night, or some of the things they did felt like disingenuous or more from an entertainment standpoint versus making some concrete points. But the worst is when you accidentally miss and you offend people, you know? And so it's so important to talk to different folks through different lenses who can help you make sure that, you know, what you put together comes together properly, you know? So the community center, sports leagues, affinity groups within the companies are always good to work with. But, you know, like I said, if you're going to do a night, you have to do it right, you know? So hopefully that answers some of what you were asking.
Well, kind of off of that and the need to do it right. And I know that Joe, you know, since he came out on Outsports a few years ago, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but it feels like, having talked with you, that there's kind of an expectation that, okay, well, you're the LGBTQ guy, and so you need to have all the answers, or you're the guy that the team, the organization is going to go to for the answers on these types of things. How do you kind of bear that burden, share that burden, and how do you go about figuring out that when you give an answer about these questions, that it's the quote unquote right one?
Yeah, so it's definitely it can be challenging at times, and I think similar to what was mentioned earlier, at first in many of the Pride meetings, I would sort of sit back and let my coworkers drive a lot of the conversations, because I didn't want to feel like I was pushing and pushing and pushing. And over time, it just became more natural for me to realize that the voice I have and the resources that I have do make it the right thing to share what I'm seeing, especially with other teams. It's definitely nerve-wracking, because we've seen teams in the NHL and other places that you know, usually mean well, and things don't always come off that way. And so every time we do something, I'm trying to think through every aspect of how it's going to play out. But, you know, certainly working with you and the Outsports crew, working with our partners at You Can Play, and, you know, Lee from the Sixers, who also wrote for Outsports, you know, we'll be sharing stuff as well, just so that the Sixers, who are part of the Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment umbrella, you know, we're in line with a lot of that. But I'm still going to the other experts out there to make sure that the answers that we are, or that I'm giving to our organization, are in line with what everybody expects.
Kind of, Amy and Erik, I'd love for you to, one at a time, to kind of explore that a little bit more. Joe mentioned a couple organizations out there that he relies on. What are some of the organizations that you rely on as partners? Not just local organizations, but also, you know, some of the national organizations. Joe mentioned You Can Play, and there's Go Athletes and Equality Coaching Alliance, all these. What are some of the organizations that you go to? And again, how have you reached out to them to build that relationship? Erik, you want to start?
Sure. I think first and foremost, one of the things that was a huge success for us was we brought in a producer for the Pride Night on an annual basis to help us program the entertainment and the authentic experience for the day of. But we also retain this person year round to help us build those bridges, because on a daily basis, you know, I'm as busy with all of our other initiatives. We reached out literally into the community with all of there's a organization called Varsity Gay League, and they have a ton of people that play kickball and football and dodgeball and you name it. They're playing sports in Southern California. And so we went individually to the organizations, and we got social influencers among those groups. With some of the national partnerships, we've worked with the Trevor Project. That's an organization that we're very heavily involved with the Point Foundation. And we've established relationships with those organizations, none of it with the intent of trying to sell tickets to them, all with the intent of trying to do good in the community. And as a result, as sort of you know, we take care of them, they end up using our night as an annual celebration. And I think those relationships have led us to even building bigger relationships with some of our sponsors. One of the biggest in LA that we have now is the Hollywood entertainment industry. The movie studios have all formed an alliance. They all have their LGBT groups within, and they all purchase group tickets to our night, and they make that an annual event now where all the studios come together and join us at Dodger Stadium. And I think with that, you start to see as the years go by, more and more connections where they come together like that.
Yeah, so again, a little different in the NFL. It's only been a few years that we've even done anything at all. And again, only having the 10 home games, we're not quite as active as going out to, have relationships with all of these local LGBT groups from the standpoint of we don't have enough programming to do something with them all, as we can't invite them all, we're not there yet of inviting them all and doing a Pride night at one of our home games and different things like that. So what we've done is, again, still pretty small. We've worked with the Minnesota Gay Flag Football League, and they were supposed to actually play some tournaments at our practice facility in April. And of course that, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But we're a little more slow moving on it, are definitely interested in working on finding some organizations out in the Twin Cities areas around youth and youth hunger and homelessness and things like that. We've launched our Vikings Foundation in the past few years, and we actually have a Vikings Foundation food truck that goes around and serves underrepresented communities and children in the area. So partnering with our other departments in our organization on things that they're working on already that we can join in on, I think is really important. And again, some of that low-hanging fruit that's really easy to sell to leadership and management of saying, hey, we're already kind of doing this. Let's add to it. Always looking to do more, and honestly would look at what you guys are doing for sure as guidance and to show what we can do. And I think Lisa said it earlier, talking about, the competition atmosphere of it. There is nothing wrong with showing people, hey, look what all these other people are doing. We're not doing it. We should be doing it. Don't we want to be the best? And so
Sid, I'll show you an example right here of this. Is literally an example of, it has nothing to do with a ticketing initiative. This is something, if you can see on the screen, that we did last Sunday. And this was the All Black Lives Matter march, that protest march, and that took place in LA. We created this graphic, and we wanted to be a voice on that day. And this is something we ran across social. We took these ads out in Southern California and the Blade and different publications. And this was just a natural opportunity where our ownership and organization were willing to take a stand in a strong position on an issue that was relevant and in the moment. And I think this is the kind of authentic connection that helps when you're inside of an organization.
Erik, I know that there's a lot of sensitivity around who's organizing and who's speaking about Black Lives Matter. And in LA, it was a very hot button issue in the LGBTQ community a couple of weeks ago. Did you reach out to All Black Lives Matter, or did you have somebody that you made sure that you were not overstepping by taking out these ads?
Yeah, so we did reach out to All Black Lives Matter, and different than, there was definitely some controversy, for those who don't know, with LA Pride and the connection. Our position as an organization was the two aren't mutually exclusive. You can promote All Black Lives Matter and you can support Pride. LA Pride has a celebration that's going to take place this week, but we absolutely wanted to, and we're supporting that. There's going to be a telecast on ABC7 here in town, and we're part of that broadcast as well. We definitely reached out, and we wanted to let them know that we wanted our platform to be used. If they had any message that they wanted, we let them know we were there to support, not to try to sponsor the event, not to try to take over the event, but literally to be an amplifier for whatever the message was.
Carl, looking at this from a different perspective, so we've kind of talked about how, if you're in a front office or you're with a team, what are some of the ways that you've made sure you didn't misstep, some of the resources you've used. Now taking a look at it from the other side, from the fan's perspective, if you're a fan and you want to engage your team in expanding your Pride presence or your embrace of the community, who should you reach out to, and what are some of the things, and I'd love for all of you to talk about this because I think each team is different. What are some of the the conversations or the ways to frame embracing the community that will speak to your organization? For example, Amy talked about, well, we don't need to sell tickets, but boy, we're really competitive. Like inside the Kings, if you're a fan of the Kings, how could you reach out to the Kings to expand the community outreach?
I think it's one thing to continue to involve yourself in initiatives like our Equality Night, with initiatives, with a different volunteer initiative that the Sacramento Kings, have throughout the community. It's a conversation starter. If you're someone who, is active within the community, like Amy mentioned, there are similar instances where you can be a part of the LGBT+ community and support initiatives that are like-minded and the same. Like she said, supporting the underprivileged and the other, that area of your market that needs that direct support. So I think there's a way that you can merge the two through volunteerism, and just really urging internally your team to be able to reach out. I think it's a direct reflection of the Kings and the diverse group that we have, diverse in all aspects, as well as inclusive in thought. I think our diversity and inclusion committee that we've formed definitely has a web out into the entire organization, and looking for resources throughout the community that we can be a part, and we can tag team and reach out and see how we could be a resource, as well as how we can get the community involved as well. So I think it works both ways for the best way to reach out and to really, like you said, for fans to get involved as well.
Gosh, that was so insightful, because you have a lot of people who will get on Twitter and complain about their pro team, but they're not season ticket holders. They haven't been to a game in 4 years. They've never been a part of a volunteer event from the team. And what I'm hearing is, the more engaged you are with the team, the more the team is going to listen to what you have to say as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, there are many conversation starters, that occur. When you have the opportunity to volunteer and attend different series, whether it's just on a topic, right, that's important to the community. There are a plethora of different opportunities that you can have, not just on a game night, to involve yourself with the team. And if you're looking at all of those opportunities in totality, I may be involved, Lisa may go, and you may grab the ear of any one of the, front office, or, any one of the sales team, for that matter, to be able to engage and start those conversations, and for those conversations to be taken back internally and within the organization, especially if there isn't a representation from the LGBTQ+ community within the organization.
Yeah, and Carl, I would say, whether it's fair or not, if you do have representation within the organization that represents the LGBTQ community, we'll probably have to work harder than others to try to make sure that I have good relationships with all of our departments, because when I'm asking for things, it's extra work on them. Or if we're at a game or just out in the community or whatever, and someone mentions something about the Vikings and the LGBTQ community to our social media manager, but he and I have a good working relationship, he may say, hey, absolutely, I'll get you in touch with Amy. I'm not so sure on everything we're doing. If he hates my guts, he might not pass that along. And again, whether it's fair or not, I think making sure that, again, working maybe harder than most to have great working relationships within your entire organization to kind of help spread the word.
Yeah, and Sid, if I may jump in too, and maybe because I'm in sales, I have a little bit of a different lens. I mean, look, the community piece, 100%, right? These organizations are all here to do good. The PR, all the wins from this, great. But I'd be lying if I said the money or the finances in some cases or in some manner didn't matter here, right? And that's not just ticket sales, that can come from partnerships. But I guess it's not even about the money. This is a two-way relationship, right? If we're going to go in, or a partnership, if we're going to do this together, we're not going to keep doing nights when people aren't even supporting it and coming to the event, right? Or there's been so many groups I've worked with that have led with just a laundry list of demands, right? From we want 1,000 comp tickets, we want basically partnership assets and games. That is not the approach, right? We want you to say, hey, here's what we're looking to accomplish. We understand what you're looking to accomplish, which in every organization is in some capacity getting people in the building to support this. So here's how we can work together, right? Here's the plan that we have in place and the contacts we have that we think we can get people to support this initiative. Here's what we need from you. And hey, if we can accomplish this, can we get 100, 200 comp tickets to take care of said community who perhaps can't handle them themselves? So having been on the other side of this, it can be very off-putting if you come in candidly pretty entitled, just asking for the laundry list of what you want. Try to understand what the organization may be trying to accomplish and perhaps start there. And, that's externally. I think internally, and Amy touched on a little bit too, it's the same thing, right? Like if I go to entertainment and I say, guys, this is what we're doing for Pride Night, it's going to sell 1,000 tickets. What does that mean to entertainment? But if I spin it and say, hey, I've got this act at halftime, like it is going to blow people's socks off. They've got this many followers. And at the same time, that's accomplishing selling 1,000 tickets. Like that resonates more with them. So I think the moral is, or the lesson here is just your approach needs to be leading with what the other party's opportunity and agenda is, for lack of a better term. And then you can kind of work into some of the other stuff. It's so important.
I think what Amy was talking earlier about the competition aspect of it. And I will say one of my favorite parts of Pride Night is when I see the tweets about how great the Devils are doing, and I wish my team, whatever that team might be, would do what we're doing with the Devils. So I think there's some level of competition too that as if your team is not doing something right now. And the other thing is to help them out. As it was said earlier, there are teams that might not have an out member there or nobody to really champion the cause. So if you're in one of those cities where the team isn't doing much, find an LGBT group that would be willing to partner with them and say, when you send them an email or a direct message on Twitter, just say, I'm giving you the tools and the resources. You should talk to You Can Play. You should talk to this group in our city or state who is going to be willing to show you the ropes and make sure that you don't make a mistake. Because I do think that there's a lot of teams and organizations that would want to do it, but are just afraid of making a mistake and not being authentic. And that can be very, very scary, especially doing that first one.
As you're all talking, one of the conversations I had 10 years ago with a guy named Doug Sanborn at Miller Coors. And he said, if you want to work with Miller Coors, he was the LGBTQ liaison. He said, don't come to me and ask me to sponsor you. Come to me and ask me, how can we partner together to both reach our goals? And I've always used that word partner. And I've always found it to be successful, because if you come to somebody and say, how can we be mutually beneficial to one another, you're a lot more likely to get a positive reaction than, as Lisa said, come in with a bunch of demands.
Well, Sid, I'll just say that not much has changed in Miller in 10 years, because that's exactly what we tried to do this year with Pride. We've got a great relationship with them. They're one of our best partners. And the approach that we took is, what can we do? How can we, the Minnesota Vikings, in the month of June, help you guys? And then, a symbiotic relationship. So we're hoping to kick that off next year. And we're even trying to do something virtual type thing, and just, didn't work out this year with everything else going on. But Miller is still true to that. And absolutely, it was the easiest conversation we've had of approaching it as two equal partners.
So I want to make sure that we jump to a few questions that people have been asking, because I think some of these are really insightful. First, and I think somebody mentioned this, maybe it was Joe, what's your advice for an organization does LGBT outreach as a way to just check off a box, and they're not really interested in real involvement? So you go to a team, yeah, they're interested in selling some tickets, but they're really not interested in actually working with the community. Just some advice on how you can get around that, because not everyone has the support that the five of you have.
Yeah, so I think it's, I would say it also takes time. You know, the number of organizations that we partner with now, Garden State Equality is one of our largest partners, Hyacinth and Hudson Pride as well, we've been working with. We didn't have that the first year. You know, it took time to build. So I think there does need to be, you need to give the organization at least a year to grow it. And it's really telling them, here's what I want to see, and offering suggestions, because as everybody's alluding to, it's partnerships. And it's can be saying, here are other things you can be doing throughout the year. Here are other groups that you can be supporting with your social assets, with financial resources, and just showing up at their events too, and supporting them that way. So I think it's, you know, if you're in that level, it would be hopefully an in-person conversation that you could say, we need to make this truly a year-round engagement, as Erik and a bunch of other people have mentioned. But I really go back to, I think, giving them options and showing them the way, which is helpful.
You know, I'm curious, there have been a bunch of organizations that people have mentioned, and so I'd love to just offer you all kind of an opportunity just to maybe talk about an organization, national or local, that really has meant a lot to you and the success of your LGBTQ outreach. And Joe, I want to stick with you, because I'd love for you to talk about You Can Play and the work you do with them, because they're a national organization, and they worked a lot with the NHL. And so I'm curious specifically for you on what working with them, and what have you gotten out of working with You Can Play?
Yeah, absolutely. So You Can Play is one of my favorite LGBTQ organizations. I was raising money for them by running the Boston Marathon until that got canceled. And so we've partnered with them since day one. And their motto is, if you can play whatever sport it is, your race, sexual orientation, gender, none of that should matter. You know, the only thing that should matter is your competitive spirit and how well you perform. And so they offer so many resources to different groups, whether it's NHL or any pro teams, all the way down to youth sports. They will provide resources to local ambassadors to go out and train the staff and the coaches on how to be ready to have an out athlete on your team. I think that's the key part, is preparing like you already have one. So talking as though you do, so that if somebody does come out on your team, you're not having to go then find all the resources. You already have created an inclusive environment. And then on the national, or on the for the pro teams, again, it's giving them toolkits on how to do a Pride night. And these are, you know, they'll list 10 easy to difficult things to do, so that it's your toolbox. And for the teams that don't have LGBTQ team members with them that might be able to help them along, You Can Play really does a fantastic job of giving the resources so that you can go plan a successful night.
Erik, how about you?
You Can Play is great. I mean, we're on this panel. I'd be lying if I didn't give Outsports a lot of credit.
Give me another.
No. It honestly has been tremendous in terms of giving exposure to this topic, and to people who are interested in sports. There were a number of people who, you know, a decade ago were gay and thought that they were outliers because they were sports fans as well, much less thinking that they could ever have a job or a career in professional or college sports. So there are a number of organizations and individuals. Kirk Walker and Billy Bean have been fantastic. I have to say that locally, just having some of the local people on the ground, having now done this for so many years, the people that may not be as well known, but the founder of Varsity Gay League is a terrific supporter and is able to rally thousands of people to whatever initiative it is. And it doesn't necessarily mean coming to a Dodger game. We might do something out in the community and they're there to support with us. They're there to march with us. And I think that we have a number of those, thankfully. And by the way, we also are able to pull these groups together. I know that this is specifically talking about LGBT, but when we have other issues that come up, the same partners and the same allies who are lined up generally are with us with whatever issue or with whatever cause marketing that we're doing.
Carl? Again, just looking for quick anecdotes or thoughts about organizations locally or nationally that you've relied on to help build what you're doing.
I think our organization has relied a lot on the LGBT community center here in Sacramento, as well as the Rainbow Chamber of Commerce to provide resources. Even the Sacramento here center has grown within the last year. And it's amazing to see all the resources they have available, and not only that we could be a part of continuing to allow them to grow.
And Amy, I know that you mentioned the Minnesota Flag Football League. Is that one that you relied on a lot?
Yeah, and they've also, helped us, both being in sports, just having conversations with them on what are some other, who do they work with? And how could we maybe work with them as well? And then for us, the really big one is Twin Cities Pride. Just with Twin Cities Pride being as big as it is, and the support from them, and the engagement and response. Sometimes those things are not easy to put on, and they're run by very, very few people. So being able to work closely with them, and that really is our big weekend every year to show our LGBTQ support for the community, and the outreach that we can do there, and the money that we can raise goes back into Twin Cities Pride.
Lisa, I want to shift gears with you. And one of the things that I get asked a lot, and honestly, it's a bit of a frustration of mine. It's amazing to see the front offices put forth all this effort, money, and partnerships with the LGBTQ community, but so rarely do I see players get involved, whether it's the NFL's Cleats for Causes. I don't think I've ever seen a player at an Equality Night, Pride Night event, maybe occasional former player. Is that just never going to happen, or how can the community push teams to engage the players, because the players are really the face of the teams?
Yeah, I think that'll always be a balancing act, right? Man, just in general, I wish we had more overall access to our players, but I understand the basketball outside and the logic behind not total access. But I think in general, it just comes down to what causes the players are passionate about, right? So I think maybe last year, the year before that, by either some sort of survey or formal, we really engaged that in a two-way conversation. And it's interesting because it was kind of what you and I were saying before, Sid, right? We would just go to them and say hey, this is as an organization what we're supporting, here's how you can help, instead of making it two-way and saying, look, we want to understand, the causes that you're passionate about and you're interested, and then how can we partner on that, right? So it can be challenging. I think it's starting the conversation. It's figuring out within their friends and family and their network what types of things matters, right? For example, De'Aaron Fox's mother was a breast cancer survivor. So obviously that was a really natural fit for him to support that type of initiative. As far as the LGBTQ plus and community and equality nights, you don't see it too much, right? And so I do think it needs to be a continued conversation, but I do think that we can make some progress there. And at the very least, at least in our organization, we're not hearing anything against it, which can come up, right, depending on certain theme nights that you do. So, I think that's a positive and starting in the right direction. I'd love to hear what some other
Well, I want to direct that question, I think, to Erik next because, no one here is in player personnel, but Erik probably works the closest of everyone here with the players. So just love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that, what Lisa said is accurate. I think, the very same concern that every organization or every company has with supporting an issue that in some way, shape, or form could be considered polarizing to a certain faction of the fan base is something that large corporations tend to shy away from. They choose to stay on the sideline and stay silent oftentimes. I think times are changing right now. And players who are typically very young, who have a number of people who are guiding them, whether it's their agent, their social media managers, in some cases, multiple people who are managing how they do things, tend to avoid or stay away from initiatives that could in some way put some of their fans in a uncomfortable or a compromising position. So I think as I have certainly seen, and I know I've talked to you about this over the years, Sid, I think some of the work that Billy Beane with Major League Baseball has done, I think that Dale Scott, former umpire, and what others are doing, we're slowly seeing the evolution and the change. This year, I was able to get Dave Roberts and Billie Jean King, who's in our ownership group, to record messages for Pride. Players, though, are always a challenge. Players are fearful of making a misstep, of upsetting one fan. And so whether it's this issue or other issues, and I think, if you didn't see Clayton Kershaw, he put a very strong post up today about the issue going on with race in America right now. That was a huge moment I've known Clayton since he came up as a rookie. For Clayton to take such a strong position and to be so public with it, I think we're seeing the shift. But I don't, until there is a star player, until a Mike Trout or until a LeBron James or someone is willing to step forward and pave the way and make it comfortable for everyone else, I think everyone else tends to just be a little shy.
Well,
And
it's risk reward.
Go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, I just want to point out that Dwayne Wade has done an amazing job this year. And I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. And I think you will begin to see more players be okay with being an advocate for our community.
And we've seen it with others. Kobe Bryant was very outspoken as well. But Joe, it's interesting. The NHL is the only league that's never had a current or former player come out yet. As far as just player expression of support for Pride Nights, you all in hockey have the Pride tape, and you will see players put the Pride tape on their warm-up sticks. And in fact, you had a player last year keep it on and stick the entire season throughout the games. Were you involved in how to make that happen, or how did that come about?
So, I was going to jump in and say Curtis Gabriel, who is an amazing human being, an amazing hockey player, he was with us last year, and on Pride Night, in the NHL, you're not allowed to keep anything other than black or white tape on the blade of your stick, just per rules. So the Pride tape typically only stays on for warm-ups when you're allowed to use it, and then you have to go to just a regular black or white tape. And he decided he was going to put it on the handle of the stick up top, which is allowed. And so he scored the game-winning goal on Pride Night, and there were some amazing photos of him with the Pride tape on celebrating. And I think you were actually the first one to even tell me that he kept it on. I was running around, and I remember getting a message from you and then confirmed that he kept it on, and he has vowed to do that for the rest of his hockey career. And that part of that came from the fact that he had a friend who was out and had experienced homophobia. So I think it goes back to what also said about being genuine. This was a cause that he really believes in, and he's become an amazing ambassador for hockey and for the LGBTQ community year-round, pushing it. I think he's probably one of the best And you see other stars like Braden Holtby's been out there marching in the Capitol with the Capitals in their Pride Parade. So it's the tape is left out, and every single one of our guys every year goes out and wraps their stick with the Pride tape, and it's probably one of the most poignant moments for me. I didn't know how many were going to do it the first year, and then seeing them all out there with it on their sticks was really powerful, because it told me they support me, they support the cause, and they're all in. So it meant a lot.
And I remember when that happened, I got the news of it. Somebody alerted me to him keeping it on, and I reached out to a few people who all said it was against the rules. And I reached the NHL, and they hemmed and hawed, and they say it's not against the rules. Everybody seemed to think it was against the rules, but it wasn't, and people just weren't aware that they could even do it.
Yeah, and it was great.
So, we've got just a few minutes left. I always commit to ending these things after an hour because people have dinner to get to. So I just want to fly through a few questions that we have. And one is just kind of about the support of the league front office. Lisa, what has that looked like in the NBA?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. Something Joe said made me think of it too. So the NBA, first of all, is just an amazing organization to work for. So it makes me very proud with what they support, but they are starting to put together toolkits for a number of theme nights. So we tried it out this year. There were some larger partnerships with Disney and things like that, a couple of hiccups to work through, but generally speaking, the concept is theme nights are really hard to put together, right? I mean, they touch 7 different departments at least within an organization. And a lot of times when you're weighing out resources and such, it can be a tough decision whether to move forward with them or not. And so I think the NBA putting together these toolkits and essentially spoon feeding them to every market, and then hopefully partnering with our NHL, MLB, NFL partners, right? I mean, we should all be, yes, competitive, but working with each other more too, so we're not reinventing the wheel every time one of us is doing one of these nights, right? I mean, I think that would be so cool. And Sid, with your connections, I mean, perhaps that's something you can help kind of bring together. But if we saw some sort of consistent theme or message amongst the Big Four for all of our Pride nights, I mean, that would be a proud moment. So anyways, the NBA does a ton with a lot of different causes. Adam Silver always speaks tremendously about diversity and what we're doing to be an agent of change in that space. And I think these toolkits will be a tangible result of that.
Amy, you mentioned arriving at the Vikings and 2 months later spearheading Pride initiatives for the team. Somebody asked, what's your advice for an LGBTQ employee who wants to push for Pride Night but doesn't want to be that person who is just known for pushing LGBTQ issues? Does that make sense to you?
So first of all, a little bit of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Everyone's pushing, whether it's their own personal agenda or what their department's trying to do. I mean, that's the nature of just work in general. So having a little bit of that, I think is fine, because that then can show your passion, your appreciation, your knowledge. Easier to trust and move forward if you are especially an out LGBTQ employee, that you know a little bit of what you're talking about, and probably have some connections. But again, it's all about building relationships, starting small. You don't want to try to take over the world in 1 year and then it fall flat, and then you're back at ground zero and not really able to push things through. So it really is working with different departments, making sure you have the right people in the loop. You're not overstepping, certain people. I didn't just pick up the phone and call Kevin Warren and say, hey, I want to do this. I had a very private conversation with our director of HR and asked for her guidance. I think people struggle with showing their allyship at times. They're not sure exactly what to say or show or what to do, but I think most people will find that there's more allies than you think within your organization that will be willing to help you. But just like any business decision and things, you have to go about it in the right way. Know what you're talking about, have a good plan in place. Don't get all gung-ho on this and you know, in June, when you see that you want your team to be part of this next year, and then stop responding to emails a few months later. You've got to really stay on top of it, and continue to show your passion.
Carl and Erik, I think you both have some perspective on this one. This is from Micah Porter, who's a principal, a high school principal, and he wonders about how can as an educator you get your academic institution more involved in the LGBTQ initiatives of your teams. Carl, any perspective on that?
I love being able to use my voice and use my influence, and simply inviting staff, employees that are with these pro organizations out to the school and speaking to students. I think that's a great first step in being able to really get them involved in what's going on and be able to ask questions. So I think that could be a first step in getting involved.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that I think just honestly developing relationships, creating opportunities, and finding the proper people to talk to is the best way to influence change. And I think to Amy's point, I think it's a process. You know, you're not gonna change everyone's mind. Well, many of these institutions and schools, and for the same reason we're talking about players not wanting to make statements, schools and organizations and companies have the same feeling, which is we've avoided it in the past and we've stayed out of trouble. So it takes a little bit of work to show them, you know, what their return on investment is.
Well, we're getting close to the end of time, and I don't want to go over. I appreciate everyone's time. For those questions we didn't get to, everyone is pretty reachable on social media, on Twitter or Instagram, except I could not track down Carl. So Carl, if somebody wants to reach out to you, are you on social media anywhere? Because you're hiding very well if you are.
It's better to get contact with me via LinkedIn. So LinkedIn at Carl Trudeau.
Okay, great. Well, again, I appreciate you all. There are a lot more questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them in time. We will have this up on YouTube for people to share and take a look at afterward. And again, reach out to anybody here you might want some support from. So thank you all so much, Lisa, Amy, Joe, Carl, and Erik, and have a great night.
Great. Thanks. Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks.